Welcome to this tutorial on media criticism. So this entire semester, we've taken a real deep dive into how you can create media. But we also want to be really careful when we're looking at media on the internet and trying to figure out if it's actually accurate or if it's just misinformation or disinformation. Plus, on top of that, there's a whole field now of what we call media and literacy criticism. And just on its surface, it's just kind of interesting. It gives us a very different understanding of how we ought to look at things. So why is that the case? Well, for one thing, the great thing about media and literacy criticism today is it's interdisciplinary, meaning it takes all the great things in English and history and film and literature and puts it all together for us in a really interesting way of looking at things and kind of going deeper into it, which brings me to my big issue. Don't take things at face value. Whenever you're watching anything, I don't care what it is, it could be on TV, it could be in the movies, it could be on TikTok. You want to be really careful with the information that you're being given. People tend to take things at face value, and because of that, they tend to get tricked. And it's not just about getting tricked with misinformation. It's getting tricked by thinking that what's being presented to you only has one meaning to it. Give you a quick example. So back in 2012, horrible accident took place in Japan, a place called the Fukushima nuclear plant. You might have heard about it from your parents, or maybe you even saw some pictures about it. Well, there was something that came on the internet recently of these tulips or these flowers that were in the Japanese city around Fukushima. And it showed these things as having morphed into these weird kind of flowers and plants. And the big thing that was being passed on, that was the obvious meaning to it, was look at how dangerous nuclear power is. Well, that might be true and it might not. We could discuss that. But here's the problem. Those tulips that were on there, they actually didn't come from the Fukushima nuclear plant, and they were just natural. In fact, a lot of times tulips like this just kind of form through natural means. But people who saw this, in fact, if I had seen it on the internet, would have said, oh my gosh, this is such a good example of the problem with nuclear power. So the point is, how can we be critical? What can we do to make sure that we don't fall for the traps of information on the internet? Let's find out. Okay, so the very first thing I want to do is define what exactly it is that we see on the internet. And I know you're probably like, what do you mean? What is I see on the internet? I see everything from film or reels or something like on TikTok or whatever, right? I mean, one of the best ones that everybody likes to look at is cute kitten videos. I mean, how can you be upset with cute kitten videos? I mean, look at this, so awesome, right? But actually, I want you to look at everything you see, whether it's in movies, whether it's in reels, whether it's in something that somebody sends to you. It's all information. Now, when I say information, you might be thinking of like a long article that somebody sends you. That's not really what I mean. When I say information, I mean that you're being given data. In fact, that's the basis to all computer information, right? Binary codes, zeros and ones. When we're given pictures, when we're given film, when we're given actual words, it's all basically information. What do I mean by this? So there was a guy named Saussure who came up with a very interesting argument about this. He said that when we look at things, anything in a text or today in media, we should think about it in these terms, that anything, a word, is a signifier towards something called a signified. Think of for a moment cats. I know, pretty simple, right? Cats. We all kind of know what a cat is. Or do we? Is a cat this? Or is a cat this? Or maybe a cat is this. In other words, when you think of a cat, right, you're going to think of different connotations of different type of animals. Now, at the same time, you might be, okay, I get it. There are different types of cats. But why does that matter? I mean, in the end, right, a cat is a cat. We can kind of define what it is. But can we? In English, we use the term cat. In France, they use the term chat. In China, they use the term Mao. Now, I know you might be saying, yeah, but they're all still referring to a cat. But think about that for a moment. Each one of those words has a different combination of letters, and they have different connotations to them. In each culture, when we have these words, they bring up different images, different connotations for us. And because of that, any information we get is not what we take on face value, but it really has to do with the connotations. Now, you might still be saying, yeah, I get it, but I still know what a cat is, right? It's a furry, four-legged animal, right? Okay, but here's the other big question we should have. in English, why do we use the term cat? What got us to actually say we're going to put together the letters CAT and refer to that animal in that way? In other words, at the most basic level, the words that we use, they're attached to an image in our brain and they have meaning. They have connotations to them. Okay. You might still be saying, whatever, why does this matter? Who cares? Well, let me give you an example from when I grew up. Back in the 1990s, there was a new type of TV show that came on that is still around, and I know a lot of you guys watch it, called reality TV. Now, there have been a lot of different types of reality TV. The original one I remember was Survivor, the competition on the island, but there have been cooking reality TV shows. There's crime reality TV shows. These days, we see reality TV shows like the Kardashians, right? And others like them. Now, think about that for a moment. Why was it called reality TV? Well, when you think about it, the idea behind it was these are not scripted actors and actresses. Like they're acting real, and we're getting down to the real life that's going on. Most of us know that's not really true. In fact, we kind of know the way reality TV actually works. It's not real. Sure, in most of the cases, there's not a script. But what happens is the producers and directors will take two people and say, go into that room over there, and we need this fight scene. Go create it between each other, right? Now, you might say, well, that's TV. I mean, who cares, right? But why call it reality? Well, because it gives us a certain meaning. We tend to like to watch reality TV show because it shows humans as being gossipy, as having drama, being in competition, basically people going at each other, and we get to watch the train wreck as it happens. In fact, there's a theory about why people like to watch reality TV. Deep down, and I kind of know for myself, I feel this way, we like to watch it because there's drama, and deep down unconsciously, we say, I'm better than that because I don't act that way. In other words, reality TV is not just reality TV. It gives us a connotation about what reality is and about our place in reality. In other words, we always want to go a little bit deeper into what things are about, not just accept them on face value. So media criticism has a lot of different schools of interpretation. I'm going to give you two right now. The first one that I want to give you that I think is kind of the basis to all this is the psychoanalytic school of interpretation. Okay, big words. What does that mean? So psychology really got started up back in the late 1800s by a guy named Sigmund Freud. And I'm sure you've heard of him. There's a lot of criticism of him today, and there's a lot we could talk about. But I just want to give the basic premises of Sigmund Freud and why I think he's still important, even if he's controversial and some of his things just aren't true. Sigmund Freud claimed that for each one of us, we had our conscious self, meaning how we think about ourselves. And he called that the ego. But underneath the ego, he said, was something much deeper. In fact, think of it like this. Think of it as like a glacier. So whenever you go out, if you ever have a chance to like go up to Alaska or something, you see those huge glaciers, there's a massive amount of ice above the sea, right? But we all kind of know that glaciers and icebergs have a small amount above the sea, but a massive amount of ice underneath the sea. He claimed that that's true for us as well. We have what's called an id. Our id is our unconscious. It's where we store all of our primal energies and our primal instincts. It's basically what we're unconscious of and that can come out in an emotional state at any time and what gets triggered. And then there's what's called our superego. A superego is what our society tells us is okay and what's not okay about our emotions. Now, why does all of this matter? Well, today, when people look at media and media criticism, what they tend to look at is they tend to say, what are we conscious of that's up on the screen? And what's going on that's being implied that's underneath that? In other words, what's going on in the id of this particular type of show? Now, how do you do that? Well, you take whatever's in the show and you interpret it as symbols. You interpret it as what's the meaning. And there's a guy who came along right after Freud's time period. In fact, he was his student who came up with an idea about this. His name was Carl Jung. Carl Jung came up with the idea of what's called the archetypes. The archetypes are symbols that we kind of have structured in the way we do things, and we put in stories that have meanings to them. For example, we have a symbol of the hero, the symbol of the mentor, the symbol of the person who is redeemed. Okay, I'll bring up my favorite show. Star Wars, the movies that were out there, right, really demonstrate this. If you go back to the original series of Star Wars, who do you have? You had Luke Skywalker being the hero, right? And what was Luke Skywalker's job? To kind of like be mentored by people like Yoda and Ben Kenobi, so that eventually he could redeem his father, who had become Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker. It's a perfect example of our connotations and how we take things and we can organize them into these symbols. So let's start there with psychology and think about how things are symbolic. Okay, so the other big one that is out there today that I think is so important is feminist theory. Now, when we think of feminist theory, I know a lot of people have differing opinions and differing interpretations of feminist theory. But here's what I think is so powerful about feminist theory when it is used in media criticism. Feminism builds off of psychoanalytic theory, and it basically says that we live in a patriarchy. Meaning we live in, since the beginning of time, societies that have been male-run. But when they say male, they don't necessarily mean biologically male. Now, yes, in most cases, it has been biological males who have tended to run the show, in many cases, oppressing other types of people, women in particular. However, what they mean by that more is symbolic, meaning that when we talk about men and women, we are talking about gender. How do we define men versus being women on a symbolic level? And that can affect both men and women. Now, you can imagine one of the biggest ones that's come up recently has been from last summer, the Barbie movie. And the Barbie movie was pretty controversial to most people. In fact, a lot of people who watched it walked away not liking it a whole lot because they said, the Barbie movie just basically says that, sure, we're living in a patriarchy, but let's just reverse that into where women are in charge. Well, I think actually that was a misreading of what the Barbie movie was really all about. If you watch the Barbie movie, it starts off, of course, with the Barbie world where women are kind of in charge. And then eventually what happens is the men kind of take over in that world and kind of create a lot of stereotypes that we think about men. And at the end, the women are able to get back into a position in which they have some authority again, some equality. But the fear was that the Barbie movie led to this idea that women, because they've been oppressed, should then start running the show again over men. And we just created a whole new system of oppression, right? But I think that's a misreading of what the Barbie movie was really about. At the end of the Barbie movie, there are some key scenes about Barbie and about Ken and about what their relationship was all about. And what you walk away from in the end was the idea, not about who should run the show, but that the binary of gender was damaging to both men and women. Why? Because the binary pigeonholed men into one section, women into the other, and that then we had to create some kind of hierarchy. What the Barbie movie was really about was the idea that each one of us is unique and individual, and that we should accept difference. How do I get to that kind of examination? By using feminist theory, by using this idea of symbols, gender, and how we can break out of that. So, in the end, how should we approach media? Whenever we approach any media, we should ask the following questions. Number one, who created this media? Number two, what was the context for the creation of that media? Number three, what's the symbolic meaning of that media? Number four, what are the conclusions we can take away from that media? Don't ever take things on face value. Try to get to the meaning underneath the media. Thanks so much, and I hope when you go out there now, you take a second look at things.